All right, welcome back to Honest Voice. I'm Todd.
I'm Carolsue, and today we're going to be talking about a facet of communication that we don't know very much about or don't always get a chance to learn about, which is that we don't all hear the same things.
It's really interesting when you get into the communication processes. Like we said in the previous episodes, we're both trainers for crisis intervention training, and we learn a lot about communication. The interesting thing about communication that a lot of people don't think of is that we don't all hear things the same way. Like, you could be in a situation where one person gives three of us a command and we could all walk away with different perceptions of that command. Like, hey, that was rude the way they delivered it, or like, I just needed the information, I'm fine. And the other person could be walking away going, that didn't make any sense to me.
Right. So you end up kind of losing that connection before you even get started. So our whole goal here in these first few episodes is to kind of give you the tools to lay down a good foundation, which should help the work that we're going to do later go a little bit more seamlessly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're building on a foundation, and the first foundation is to give you awareness in the previous episode of all the dysfunctional styles of communication, so you could be aware that it is happening before we start introducing ways of dealing with it effectively. And this next stage is observing other people, is listening to other people. We all have different backgrounds. We all were brought up in different cultural backgrounds. We're exposed to different types of people. We are products of our environment. And like we stress a lot, one of the negative aspects of being products of our environment is that we have been loaded down with a lot of poor communication styles. We have become defensive. We have become irritated, aggressive, triggered, those kind of things. Those all come from being exposed to negative patterns and developing our own survival, basically, to deal with those particular dysfunctional types of approaches.
Absolutely. And these differences have nothing to do with your own level of intelligence, with how healthy your relationship may or may not be. These are truly just fundamental differences in the way we take in information. So we've got a few examples to share with you today that we thought were pretty cool. The first type of processor is a cognitive processor. So these are individuals who really just focus on facts, logic, and efficiency. They're trying to deliver that message as cleanly and quickly as possible. So for them, tone matters a lot less than the content that they're giving, right? So sometimes they're not going to realize that to certain receivers, that information might sound sharp or critical, when in fact their intent is to deliver it cleanly.
Yeah, now I had to learn those skills because my communication style is exactly that. I mean, after 20 years in the military, I just tell me what I need to do. Give me the point. I don't care how you deliver it, what type of tone it is. So I sort of have I call it a strange set of coping skills when it comes to that. I'm not much concerned with how people present that information to me. I just want the information. So I'm what you call basically that's a cognitive processor.
That's right.
So that's what Carolsue was talking about. So I'm the one you can basically say anything to, and I'll be like, okay. And the flip side of that is a lot of times when people use sarcasm or passive aggressive type stuff, I don't really notice it. Like, I don't really care.
Because you don't absorb it as sarcasm. It's just information.
Yeah, it's just more information.
Right.
And it's like, they might say something to me like, fine, be that way. And I'm like, what way was I?
Right.
What way am I being right now? I don't always understand that right away. So it's sort of funny.
So here's an example of something that's delivered by a cognitive processor. These numbers aren't where they need to be. If you change this step and tighten up the timeline, the problem should resolve. To some people, that sounds like just facts. Todd would think that's a great way to give information. Yes. Yeah. But for me, I might start to filter through those words to figure out what the secret secondary intent is. Oh, the numbers aren't where they need to be. Have I failed? Have I done something wrong? Is my job in jeopardy? So my brain goes all these different places where Todd has just heard the information.
Right. And something I sort of want to preface this right away is that one of the things that we're going to be talking about a lot are variables and context. And this is why we put out a big disclaimer. We're not therapists. These particular suggestions or advice or coaching that we may give, it might not work for everybody. So we need you to know that, because everybody perceives things, very differently. But like I said, I'd say our biggest flaw sometimes in communication is assuming that other people will take it exactly as you intended. The interesting thing is, once you get into the communication stuff, is that a lot of ways when you start actually examining it, because you can't unlearn this stuff, so I'm sorry, You may want to turn off your YouTube right now and stop doing this, because once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. The interesting thing is a lot of things that we do that, say the things that irritate us, are actually things that we do ourselves. And we don't realize it. So when two people, like, you may say, oh yeah, I'm that kind of person. I just tell it to me like it is. And that's exactly the way I'll take it. And then when somebody actually does that, you don't like it that way.
You didn't have to be so aggressive about that.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is also, that can change with your mood, your affect.
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
you can be having a bad day, and sometimes that direct information is just not what you were needing in that moment. So these are just things that are really important. One of the things that I always push when I'm teaching CIT is that, you know, I think the best communicators are the ones that take responsibility for the whole process. You know, I've actually seen things on the internet, like memes and stuff, that sort of confuse me, because I'll go with it for a minute and then I'll think about it. I'll be like, oh, that's not as cool as I thought it was. One of the things I saw on Facebook one time was like, you don't have to explain yourself to everybody. You don't have to be the jerk whisperer. And I was like, yeah, I don't have. And then I thought about it and I thought, but I want to be the jerk whisperer. Now, it's not so much that I want to be the jerk whisperer, but the context would be that when somebody's just being difficult, it's not your job to explain yourself all the time. If someone is refusing to listen to what you have to say or take your advice, that's what they're talking about. But in the context of where people don't understand your approach, it's one of the things I had to learn, especially as a Navy leader and as a civilian leader. Also, I'll add, the best leaders are the ones that work in such a way that they make people want to follow them, instead of assert themselves as being the leader, being in charge, or always having to basically show that they are in control.
That's a little Easter egg for a future episode.
Yeah, we'll get into the leadership stuff later, and we'll tell you why. Because anybody could be a leader. You know, you could be leader of your PTA, leader of your Cub Scouts, or whatever it is you want to be the leader of, or even just a simple team in school. So we'll get into that. I'm going off on a tangent.
It's really excited. It's okay.
I do. Yeah.
So, further examples of the different ways that people process information. We've talked about cognitive processors. The next on our list is emotional processors. These are folks who tend to hear tone, pacing, and facial expressions long before they hear the message that you're trying to give. So content is filtered through emotional safety. Am I good here? Is my relationship with this person intact? Am I being criticized? Have I fallen short? Long before they hear that initial phrase of the numbers aren't where they're supposed to be. So they might miss the whole point of the message if that delivery feels too harsh.
Yeah, and that's really important to understand, that when you're in a crisis situation, that's a good time to bring up the word sensitive. So when somebody is elevated, they're upset, they're crying, they're angry, they're yelling, that is an identification of being sensitive in that moment, meaning that they themselves are sort of walking on their own eggshells, trying to regulate themselves in some capacity. So this is where you would want to use a softer approach. And that's a good indicator that this is where maybe me, in those moments where I like the directness, maybe that directness is not going to fly so well when I'm in a sensitive state. Maybe I will want more emotional content. Maybe because I'm sensitive, I will be more fixated on your emotional affect as you're coming at me than I would be when I'm just in work mode.
Let me give an example, because you just brought this back to mind. So I was having a really, really hard time at work a couple of years ago. I had a boss who was just relentless, just a source of stress for a really long time. And I'd reached this point during the day where I just thought I had all my words together and I was going to call this boss and I was going to tell them how they were making me feel. So I called Todd to say, you know, this just happened and I think this is what I'm going to say. And I gave him the whole script, and his tone, having recognized that I was stressed out and anxious and frustrated, he softened his tone and he said, I am so sorry that you are feeling this way and that you are dealing with this. But I want us to take a step back and I want you to think about what might happen and how he might receive this information. And if he hadn't started that response with that softness and that empathy, I might not have heard that he was trying to very gently steer me towards safer waters.
Yeah.
before I jeopardized my job.
Yeah, we don't mean to like drop these gold mine of nuggets just haphazardly. Like we'd like to, maybe we should record them and at the end put them in bullet form. So
that's a good idea.
But one thing to remember is never make big decisions with big emotions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I was all ready, and I thought it was the best idea I'd ever heard.
Yeah, we've both done that, and we've both gone to each other and been like, okay, that's probably not the best thing to do right now, because once again, you know, our thoughts, our intent is going to create an impact on the person that we're dealing with that's not going to be what our intent is because of the emotional aspect of it.
That's right.
You know, if you want to be heard in those moments, here's a great example, a very simple example. When you want to be heard, a lot of us have a tendency to force it. We push those words onto somebody else, but are they ready to hear it? So that's not a fault on their part. It's, if we really want to be heard, we need to take those extra moments to find the right timing to be heard. And just running up on somebody in the middle of, like, as soon as they walk in the door or as soon as they wake up in the morning or something like that, that's not good timing, right? I mean, that's not going to benefit you. So that's not on them that they can't function until they have coffee. That's a
real thing.
Fact.
It is.
But the main thing is that, you know, we do have to take responsibility for our timing. One of the other processes that as you move on is relational processes. And that's something that Carolsue and I, we've sort of evolved quite a ways from our original communication styles at the beginning of our relationship are completely different than they are now because we have proactively learned it. So this is a good time to drop the little tidbit of information is that, you know, in couples, we don't think about this. We don't debrief afterwards because after a problem, we just want it to be done with. But really, it's essential. When you have an argument, we always recommend that people work on strategizing when they're doing something. Like, say, one of you's cooking. The other person could just be leaning on the counter while you're cooking. This is a good time to communicate because you both are sort of doing something at the same
something
time.
That's neutral.
Yeah, and it, believe it or not, from a psychological standpoint, it keeps your frontal cortex engaged where your executive functioning and your decision making is going on and keeps you away from the amygdala where the fight, flight, or freeze or the where you get that feeling when you're frustrated that's leading to that pit in your stomach or that knot that's telling you, I'm about to get upset. It sort of keeps you away from that. So debrief is great. And just something simple like, hey, what can I do better next time? Was it my approach or did I sound too aggressive? Those are the kind of questions to ask in those debrief moments. But the other thing is with the relational processors, this is where you evolve. This is the nugget I was going to leave is that you may have a communication style and your significant other, or really anybody, has their communication style. So this is going to be one of those things where relationally you come up with your own communication style that works for both of you. And you know, a lot of people get into these, they're trying to change me or they're trying to make me do things that aren't like me. You got to measure that.
You do.
You really do, because a lot of times what we have found out is like the minor changes. I can honestly say I feel like, I know you say otherwise, I feel like I was a mess when we first met. And I have learned so many things about how to communicate more effectively just because of those debriefs. And then I work on them afterwards. I like, you know, we both do. We both try to figure out, let's do this better. And it's interesting because if you were to make a spreadsheet of your conflicts, you will see they will decrease over time tremendously, just all by themselves. They clear themselves up because you are working on the communication. You're working on overall improved communication. And we've watched couples that spend decades together that never rise above this. They basically have the same arguments for their entire lives together, their entire marriages. And it's really, when you really break it down, it's not different things. They are having the same fight. Sometimes the same fight 2 or 3 times in a day. And if you would just debrief and find out what it is that's contributing to these fights, you might actually come up with a solution where you're not having them at all. And it really is possible to not have aggressive conflict in a relationship and actually communicate.
Absolutely.
And you guys are like going to turn the thumb out. They're in fantasy land.
Trust us. Give it a shot. Trust us.
Is this real? Yeah.
So the next example of a different type of processing is survival-based processing. And some of you out there may relate to this. If you grew up where every wrong move or every different way to handle a situation was criticized or judged, or if you grew up in an environment that was very chaotic or very unstable, then your default is to look for a threat. So any negative feedback, any critical feedback is going to be perceived, this may sound exaggerated, but it's not, but as an attack on your safety. So you can't hear anything about the words that are being said to you because you are trying to figure out if you're going to make it through this conversation. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true for a lot of people.
I think one of the things that clouds us in those situations with the survival based is that it's part of us. Like, none of this makes us a bad person. I can't reflect on this enough. I just want to tell this over and over again. Everything that we're talking about that is not as good or wrong or ineffective communication, we've done all of it.
Absolutely.
We have done all of it. Everything we talk about is not coming from a mountain where we're telling people down there, this is how you will act.
And we're human. This stuff still happens. You get into an especially stressful moment. Traffic can be a good example of that, where you're afraid about the way your spouse is driving, and so you're not able to communicate as calmly as you normally would because there's a fear piece to it. So you revert back to these older patterns that aren't necessarily as healthy. It happens.
Yeah, but the main thing is that over time, you'll start to balance each other out. Like, that was a good example that you just brought up, conflict in the car. Say you have a lot of conflict where it's something simple corrections, like, hey, don't forget the light's coming up, and somebody's like, I know, I've driven this 1,000 times.
I have eyes.
Yeah, those are indicators that there's a communication problem already. If a person's getting defensive from a suggestion that the other person is giving to help both of you, that other person may need to learn to cope more effectively to receive that kind of input, because this person's just trying to help. It wasn't aggressive. But some people, it says more actually about you, how you receive that message, than how that person's actually putting it out. And unless, of course, they're yelling at you, which is going to change that emotional that emotional process. But over time, you all will find out that yelling does not contribute to anything except negative outcomes.
Yep.
We will talk more about self-regulation. People who are like, well, I can't even get into the communication until I learn how to calm myself down. We will get into that. But for those of you who have pretty good self-regulation tactics, this will help you in the interim. So just remember, like I said, we are products of our environment. So if we're the kind of person that somebody comes up and starts talking to us in the survival-based style, there's a massive difference between going, what do you mean by that?
Yes.
And what do you mean by that?
Yes.
There's a massive difference. And see, that is just a mindset that I changed, but it changed my entire communication style, which is going to impact the other person. So that's my example of there is a kind way for every kind of negative expression. We believe. So far, and if you can prove us wrong, you'll have our email address. You can say, hey, this is a load of crap. It's a load of crap. This will never work. We can't do this. And we'll keep working with you. And if you have a personal question, please don't hesitate to drop us a line and say, hey, this might be off track, or this might be in a future session, but I'm having a problem with this. What's your feedback on that? And we'll do our best to try to give you a personal response. And also, let us know if you want to remain anonymous, or if we can say on the podcast
who you are.
Hey, Janine, we heard your message. This is what we're dealing with. Okay. So if you're out there, Janine, drop us a line.
So
all right.
We give you all this information so that you can think about not only how you tend to receive information, but maybe how you've noticed that your partner, your friend, your coworker also receives information. And either as a preparatory conversation before the next time you'll maybe have a quasi-conflict or just a hard conversation coming up, you can introduce this concept of, hey, I just learned this new information, and I realize that I tend to receive information from a really emotional standpoint, so it would be helpful to me if you could use this tactic when you give information to just give me a little bit of a prep that it's coming, so I can kind of relax myself, and then it'll be better for me to hear what you're trying to say and receive that information a little more productively.
Yeah, and we'll give you a personal example right now. I did say that I like direct communication, but Carolsue and I found out in the midst of our personal learning of each other that when I am stressed, that I'm not so good on the direct. And we found that out because Carolsue and I both work with people that have severe mental illness. So we help them with communication. We help them with just basic skills to try to get their needs met when we're assisting them, when we were case managers back in the day. So we had to learn certain communication styles. And the one that Carolsue uses with clients is very effective with them. But for me, I heard it as what I called the business voice. So if I have a problem, you want to demonstrate the business voice? Do you think you could do that? Okay, so I'll say to you, I'm really stressed out today because a lot of people were talking to me, and I think I just got overwhelmed with all that communication, and I just didn't like it, and it really freaked me out today.
So you were in this environment that wasn't really something you were comfortable with, and it was kind of stressing you out.
Yeah, it was. So how could you talk to me in such a way that, let's try this one more time, where it could be softer, okay? So these people stressed me out all day, and I got overwhelmed, and it just made me cranky, and I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a lot to deal with in one day.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were really caught off guard.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, you see, there's nothing that Carolsue did wrong in either one of those scenarios. But in that moment of sensitivity, her direct responses it felt a little cold to me. And, I deserve more warmth from my wife, when we're dealing with these kind of situations. At least I felt so in the moment.
That's right.
So that was just that one little minor thing. Nobody was doing anything wrong. It was just a receptivity identification that we found out was basically we found a better way to do it. It didn't make the old way bad, ugly, mean, rude, whatever. It just was another way that was better.
Yeah. So we cannot encourage enough the idea of just sitting down, as Todd said, right after, 30 minutes after an uncomfortable conversation and trying to debrief and find out how we could have handled things differently so that we don't repeat those same mistakes that make our partners, friends, coworkers feel unheard or not supported.
Yeah, so the one thing we want to really stress is that we are all products of our environment. Mm-hmm. So everything we do, we learned it somewhere else, and we've never learned any other way. And not only that, you can turn on any television show, any movie, the news right now is nothing but negative feedback. People insulting each other, people yelling at each other, people clapping back, calling out, putting on a report. I don't know if they say that anymore. That's sort of old school.
I got it.
Okay. But those kind of things are going on. So it's really hard to not be negative in your approach. So that's something to consider when you're interacting with somebody. So let's talk about why sometimes feedback can be that flashpoint. I want everybody to think about this, is that when you are given information that's feedback to somebody, or you're trying to influence them, or you're trying to, get them to do something that you want them to do, be it out of the goodness of your heart, or even if it's just to feel a different way. Like when they're feeling bad, you want them to feel better. So we go about doing these things. Now think about the approach and the impact and what a sensitive person needs. So let's talk about some examples. A lot of times, especially when helping, we do what we think is helpful, but I don't think a lot of us really get into what this person needs in this moment. And this is one of our biggest setbacks when it comes to communication. And that's when you're helping, a lot of people, believe it or not, they approach it conditionally and they don't even realize it. Once again, this is a pattern that has gone on forever, and it's the only thing a lot of people know. So when you offer somebody assistance and they don't accept it, don't take a slight to that. Don't put the pressure on somebody that's in pain and say, fine, be that way, because you won't take this wonderful gift of kindness that I am giving to you in this moment. A lot of times that's not really helpful, and that's not really taking care of the person. It's sort of taking care of yourself. It's like, I want to be kind so I can feel good about myself, rather than I want to be kind so I can actually help this person. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the key here is that if you come in to try to provide feedback and assistance and you find that the conversation is not going the way you had hoped, and in fact the person seems to be becoming more stressed out or starting to shut down, really your best bet at that moment is just to reach out to that exact person and say, hey, I came in here, I was really hoping to give you some helpful ideas, but it seems like I'm not doing anything except stressing you out. Help me understand what you're thinking right now. So pull them back in instead of assuming that we can mind read and just know what the other person needs. Identify that and collaborate about it.
Yeah, and like I said before, in our different states of mind, this is where, if we haven't introduced it already, this is where you need to understand the difference between intent and impact.
Yes.
And this is a big deal, especially when it comes to kids, because I know I've made this mistake a million times. You think when somebody's competent, cognitive, you're thinking that a 10, 12, 14, 15-year-old kid they're very articulate. They've got a big vocabulary and they're talking. So you think they understand on the same level as you do, but they don't. So the intent in a lot of these things is completely different than the actual impact. A great thing to remember is a lot of times your intent is to help, but the impact from their perspective could be that you're trying to correct them, or you're trying to shame them, or you feel that they did something wrong because they don't have all the background. And then if they don't take your advice and you push it, then, that's definitely not helpful. I mean, really in those moments, and I've done it. I'd be like, fine, maybe I just won't talk to you at all then. I mean, that's not helpful, because now the person's hurting. I've actually made them hurt even more now. I've not only not helped them in the supportive moment, but I have now given them another problem, because now they've upset me.
That's right.
Because I chose to get upset because they didn't comply with my assistance. And that is a really common problem.
It is.
And we're both trainers for suicide awareness. So those are one of the things that we stress with a lot of people is that offer the presence, just being present in those situations. I'm going off on a mild tangent here, but we'll talk about this in depth as well. Be there for that person with what they need and say, a lot of times be like, hey, I don't know what to say right now, but I want to help you and I'm here. So rather than give advice in that moment or direct them or give a correction or offer a suggestion, sometimes it's like, hey, I don't really know what you need right now because I've never been in that situation, but I want to sit here and, if you just want to talk about it, go ahead. And if you can get them talking about something they want to, then that's going to be improving the communication.
Shifts the dynamic. Absolutely.
So you're not telling them what you want to talk about in that moment. You're asking them what it is that they really need. So that can be really, really helpful.
And in that way, a lot of these conversations, making them collaborative, no matter what the topic, is the best way forward together. So let's say you have feedback to give to a coworker or a subordinate or your spouse. Identify the issue, but then make it a problem that you're working on together. Like, hey, it's starting to feel like we're eating dinner later and later and later.
No, that was a good one.
Does that work?
So
okay.
We're eating dinner later and later and later. And you could go on and say the reason is because I come home and I put the dishes away. I wash what dishes were in the sink and I put them away. I get the kitchen ready. Could you help out maybe by doing the dishes before I get home from work? Rather than, she could easily just bust in. Can I just come home to a clean sink once in a while so I can get dinner going? Once again, the negative approach, that's not going to help. But, what can we do? The main thing is that when people get into a conflict, they attack each other.
Yes.
When really, if you can both attack the problem, that's where you're going to have your greatest success. I will be honest with you, if you're watching these kind of things, and I've been in these situations before where I'm trying to de-escalate somebody and now they're sort of embarrassed about their behavior. So they're going to continue being provocative. They're going to be like, I don't want to talk right now. I don't care what you have to say.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do about those moments except maintain the kindness and, the calm. And sometimes also take stock in the fact that we program everyone around us to respond to us. If I'm the kind of person that I'll let you answer this. If Carolsue comes up to me and she says, babe, can we talk for a moment? And I go, what? This again? I mean, can I just come home, put my stuff down, relax for an hour, and avoid this conversation again later? No, I mean, that's the hidden meaning there. But,
right.
Yeah. But that flare up in that moment, what's that going to do to Carolsue's affect? How comfortable is she going to feel approaching me next time? This is exactly what leads to in relationships where one side will constantly be saying, not all at one time, but will constantly be saying, why didn't you tell me this sooner? Or why didn't you tell me this when it happened? Okay. Because you act like this every time I approach you. And that's what's really important to understand is that we do shape the way other people's communication styles are toward us in a lot of cases. So when you come into the animosity and the learning each other's ways, that's where you can communicate this stuff out. Say, look, we need to approach this, and getting angry about it's not going to help in the moment. So when you're ready to talk, let's go ahead and communicate about this stuff.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so talking a little bit about the importance of this awareness. These are things we may have never had any reason to think about before. So how does this change things? So once we have an understanding that people receive information differently, then their reactions won't feel so personal. So if I give what I think is safe, calm feedback to a subordinate at work, and they become upset instantly and become defensive and kind of shut down, instead of me thinking, geez, what is the deal with that person? Why are they so reactive? I can understand that, oh, maybe I needed to change my message so that it would be received in a way that they could do something productive with it instead of setting off a reaction. It's intel. I'm learning about how to best communicate with the people around me. It may seem like it's a lot of work, but truly, for relationships to be strong and honest, this is information you want. I want to understand the best way to talk to you because I don't want to have the same conversation 9 times because I just keep guessing that you're going to receive it the right way, and I don't accept any feedback from you about how you might like to receive information.
Right.
That's a waste of time, and we don't like to waste time.
Yeah, and honestly, it's really strange when you really start breaking this down is that overall, like aggression and anger, it doesn't get your needs met ever.
Mm-mm.
Like, it's really interesting. And we're going to talk more about this later. We had a 3-part program that we were going to do on anger, but we started looking at it and we were thinking that's too much. So we're gonna break it down and separate it more. So we're gonna give like an intro to the angry thing, talk about anger and what it really is and how to disarm it if you're looking for that.
Yeah.
Now, if you like your anger and it's
and
how
it
you
works
rule,
well for you.
yeah, it's how you rule the world, then probably don't watch.
Again,
this.
skip that podcast. Don't listen to that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, don't listen.
The main thing is that learning how to approach these things in a calmer manner is always going to be more effective. And that's like customer service always baffles me. Why do people yell at people in customer service? And I know the answer is you get frustrated because that one thing you drove 20 miles to get isn't on the shelf. So you go to customer service and it was on sale. And you go there and it's not there. So it frustrates you. But I don't understand how anyone thinks that they're going to get better service when they're mean to somebody.
I know.
That's the thing that baffles me all the time. And I don't mean to go on another tangent, but like we train law enforcement and crisis intervention. And that's another thing I don't understand. It's like when we pass somebody that's been pulled over by a state trooper and they have this mean look on their face,
the
you know,
angry gestures and the
do they think that they're gonna, like, the cop's gonna walk up and say license and registration, and they're gonna be like, don't you have anything better to do today? You could be out catching criminals and stuff. Do they really think the officer is gonna be like, whoa, hey man, I didn't mean to make you mad. I don't really want to deal with this right now, and you know, you're so angry. I'm just gonna get in the car and leave this because this is too much. You're only making matters worse every time you show that negative level of emotion. And if you think that it's making you look like you have the upper hand, that's something you created in your head. That's something everybody who has that idea, it's that basic bullying mentality. If you think that makes you feel stronger or look stronger, that is an idea that you created that you could just as well as, I'd like to say uncreate, but actually the best way to put that is to improve upon. You can improve that idea, and you don't get your way. There's always going to be an alternative. There's always going to be something you're going to lose out on because of that approach.
Absolutely.
So if you can find a nicer way, and for those of you that think that that's like kissing somebody's butt or placating or something like that, it's not about that. It's about just being a decent human being to other human beings and trying to communicate your needs in such a way that you can get them fulfilled. And that's really all it is. It's communication simplified. Right there.
Our whole goal through all of these podcast topics is, if you have found that communication has brought you some stress, or there have been relationships that just you have not found a way to get your own needs met, or to work with your partner or your friend to have a good, healthy communication style, we offer that for every challenge there is an opportunity to learn new skills to make that better. And it's not about relenting power. If you're looking for endless power, again, this may not be the podcast for you. But if you want relationships where both people can speak openly and find a plan that works for both of them, that's what we're here for. And it does mean a little bit of education on our part and a lot of practice, because we're still practicing and we'll be practicing forever. But this kind of information helps you take these conversations from being awkward and uncomfortable to being collaborative and productive, in hopes that you won't have to have the same fight every month or 6 weeks for the rest of your marriage, or the same problems with your coworkers because you don't know how to approach them without them becoming defensive or shutting down.
Exactly. And that shutting down is exactly what we're going to be talking about in the next episode,
Absolutely,
right? Yeah, so we'll talk about what happens when people shut down. But like I said, a lot of that shutting down, we have become products of our environment. The individuals that react when they hear bad news, they were taught that. Yep. That's how they learned to handle it. We call it getting it on you. Like, this negative influence is just everywhere, and it gets on you, and it's very hard to get away from when these reactions are what you see. We mimic what we see. That's why the best leaders are the ones that lead by example, because that's where your people learn from, not what you tell them, not the policies that you identify, but what kind of person you are and how you communicate that to them is what they're going to pick up on. The same thing with kids. Kids become what you are, not what you tell them to.
Yes.
And it's the truth. It's very, very interesting once you start analyzing this stuff. And if you can remove the pain from it, those that don't want to visit that because they're like, well, that's going to tell me what a bad dad I am or what a bad mom I am.
Yeah.
Those are the things that you've got to push aside. And if you feel that way, if there's things that make you feel bad, then I would like to challenge you to understand that identifies a coping skill that you need to improve on. So if there's something that makes you upset about your thoughts, then that is a coping skill that you need to start working on. And it's a choice, just like we talked about before. You know how one person decides to take it a certain way and another person decides to take it another way. A lot of times that is all choice, unless it's an overt attack on you.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it has to do a lot with how you think about the situation and how you react to those thoughts, which we'll talk more about when we get into the anger section, I believe. So think about some things this week while you're processing this particular episode. Here, think about the last time someone reacted to something that you said strongly. Think about the differences too. Think about some of the times where you've said something and they reacted in such a way that you were not prepared for. Like, that was not my intent. And please, whatever you do, if I may add this also, whatever it is that you do that make people mad, do not try to justify it with, I didn't mean to. There's two very significant differences between using, and as people who are crisis de-escalators, we are people that are actually trained to go out into the community, and when people are upset, even those with severe mental illnesses, we can calm them down or de-escalate them, and that's our job. So we actually think about this stuff all the time, how to communicate to someone the most effectively. But all right, so let's go ahead and do an example of that, of the I didn't mean to when it wouldn't work, and show you just from an outside looking in, you know, why it's so ineffective.
Look, I wasn't sure if I wanted to bring this up, but when you came home like half an hour late yesterday, you didn't give me any heads up about that, and I had dinner ready and I was holding up a bunch of stuff trying to get ready for you to come in the door, and I didn't hear from you, so I thought you were going to be home at the same time, and that just really made things a little bit harder for me.
Okay, but I didn't mean to do it. I mean, I was busy and I had a bunch of stuff to do. So see, in that moment, my response, that doesn't fix her problem.
Problem solved.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people do that, and once again, I need to listen to what's bothering her right now. This isn't a reflection on me and my personality. This was something that I could have done better. It could have even been a mistake. And I guess this is a good time to talk about critical feedback real quick. So one of the things we put out in crisis intervention training, because we get into a section where we actually have to critique them on their skills. So we put out, there's 3 ways to take constructive criticism. And that's one, you can get offended by it, and that's a choice. You know, if somebody says something, and think about this, it's really a choice how you want to respond to that. And we're going to talk more about that later, but it really is a choice, because somebody calling you the worst name in the book is really no different than somebody calling you a poopy head. Okay, and if you can think about it that way, an insult's an insult. One you'd laugh at, the other one, for some reason, we would get offended, including ourselves back in the day. So the first way is to be offended by it, and that's a choice. The other is to self-implode, what we call it, and it's like, oh gosh, I never do anything right. When someone's giving you that critical feedback, like, man, I should have got it. I just can't believe that I didn't do it right. That does nothing for anyone. In fact, it's actually a problematic issue with what we were talking about in the beginning of this, how a lot of condescension or a lot of shaming type expressions that we use to motivate people aren't very effective, but we also do it to ourselves. We shame ourselves. We tell ourselves things that are untrue because we think it's going to correct the problem. Or worse yet, we believe we deserve some kind of punishment for such a simple mistake. The problem is that if you are of that mindset, is that you might be punishing others because you feel that type of justice kind of thing. But we shouldn't be punishing anybody. We should be teaching each other for things that don't go the way we'd like them to. So you can get upset with the person telling you, you can get upset with yourself, or you can just take it as, like Carolsue said, data. It's just data that you've been given that you can determine whether or not you can integrate or improve upon. Everything we do, this is another thing that people get very upset about in this day and age, is that just about everything we do, we could do it better. So input can always be good, and all you have to do, rather than be offended by it, is just say, thanks, I appreciate that, but I'm already doing this thing, you know, even if it's not acceptable or if it's helpful, just think about it. Of course, there is a fourth way. You could just like tell us to pack sand and I don't care what you're saying. That obviously
is an option.
So think about that with the critical feedback. Think about this week, think about times where someone's reacted strongly and try to catch yourself without being defensive. Ask them, say, hey, what about that offended you? Because honestly, I've been in situations before and I've told people this, because a lot of times the way you say something isn't the
I'm
problem.
glad you said that.
Yeah, it's the way they're receiving it because of the way they're feeling right
Yeah.
now. So sometimes there are like, you have to stop doing that thing because you're going to hurt somebody.
Right.
That is just cut and dry. And if they get upset about that, that's one of those three choices. They're being offended by it. And a lot of times, if they're being offended by it and they say, I just didn't like the way that, and I've done this, they're like, well, you could have said it better. And it's like, well, tell me how I could have said that better that would have made you feel better. And usually they don't have an answer for that. So that's where it's a good identifier. And I'm not saying antagonize somebody. Don't go to them and say, well, tell me how I could have said it better. That, once again, goes back into the same problem. So honestly, teach me how I could say it better that wouldn't offend you. And a lot of times they will find out that, maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was me. So that in itself creates some learning in those moments.
That can be part of a really helpful debrief. It's probably not something to get into right after the miscommunication, but if this is a relationship you're trying to hold on to, then come back 30 minutes later and say, hey, I just wanted to check in with you about that conversation because it seemed like we didn't really land on the same page. And hopefully, if this is a relationship that both of you want to continue with, then that person will be thankful for that opportunity and will give you the feedback. But all of us just trying to learn better how to communicate with each other, try to practice that sometime this week. Try to go in after giving somebody feedback and go in a little bit later and say, hey, help me understand how that landed for you. How did that come across? Use that as information for yourself, not as an opportunity for them to just praise you and praise you and praise you for being the best feedback giver ever.
Which they will eventually.
That's right. But you're honestly trying to learn them, trying to learn how you come across, and use that as intel, as data, as we say, to sharpen your own skills and find the best way to communicate maybe some tough conversations with people that you care about.
All right, so we talked about when this all started, about how much crazy communication there is out there and how dysfunctional it is. Today we're talking about how we all think differently, we all take it differently. Okay, so we're going to come back next time, but we're going to talk about the actual words that actually help you. This is all about awareness right now. We're still showing you that people think differently, so we have to pick our words, but next time we're actually going to start talking about those words.
Yes, it just gets better and better as we go. So thank you for joining us. As always, we will leave information in the comments on how to reach out to us so that we can provide a little extra guidance, or if you have things that you'd like to hear us talk about, please let us know.
And keep working on your honest voice.
Have a good day.
Bye now.